American ethnicity, who was here, how they get here, why they get here, etc. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to start this new. Colonies. Here's a really cool map. Yes. I don't know. Do you often take a lot of notes?
Oh, that's the East Coast.
You might get it if you would like it. I put it back here. Yoink. Here we go. Look at the map. This is a map of settlement patterns around 1750. Towards the end of the colonial era. By the 1750s, there is an American identity, and we're only a quarter century away from the Revolutionary War. So the setup of the 13 colonies is pretty set by 1750, and this map shows us the ethnic groups that were living here at the time. And the first thing that should kind of jump out at us is America was ethnically diverse from the beginning. That America did not become ethnically diverse when Spanish-speaking people started arriving in the 1960s. That America was an ethnically diverse country back in colonial times, more so than really any other country on Earth. And just looking at the map very quickly, we can see the degree of ethnic diversity that existed in the 13 colonies. We're going to kind of start in the north and work our way south and talk about a couple different ethnic groups with some degree of specifics. One of the themes of American history in the AP course is immigration and migration. We should be able to kind of take this as a starting place. And if we see the Germans here, be able to connect what happened with the Germans later in American history. What happened with the German ethnicity in America up until Woodrow Wilson extinguished it in the 20th century. I'm sorry? Ethnic diversity in the colonies. Let's start in the north. There is one place on this map where there is no ethnic diversity. And as we can probably imagine, where is that? Where do we not see, in what colonies are there not lots of different colors on this map?
Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut.
Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, the heart of Puritan New England. What ethnicity lives there?
English.
The English. Not white. Who said white?
Beyonce.
Not white. I'm glad you said that, though. Let's take just a few minutes and talk about that. First of all, white is not an ethnicity. Any more than black is an ethnicity. How? That's a race. But I think we could all agree that a Caucasian person from Chechnya is culturally, ethnically, religiously, historically different from a Caucasian guy from Ireland. You're talking about two completely different people. And we should also be aware of another interesting fact. What we think of as white in the United States in 2014 is not what people have associated with white throughout other times and places. If you went back to 1914, if you went back 100 years, the Irish, for example, were not white. They still looked white. They were as white as Larry Bird. But they were not considered to be white. Give you another example. If I asked you to tell me what's an Asian, you'd probably. Where are Asians from?
Asia.
that's not what you mean when I say, that's not what you think when I say Asian. That's absolutely not at all what you think when I say Asian. You think people from China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Korean. You do not, when I say Asian, you don't think of Russians. I guarantee you don't. In the United States, when I say Asian, you think of East Asian. If I go to England and I say Asian, what do you think of? Pakistanis. In England, an Asian is someone from Pakistan. Saudi Arabia, geographically, is that in Asia? Yes, it is. Geographically, Saudi Arabia is part of the Asian continent. Saudi Arabia is all in Asia.
No, I'm saying like it's not just that. Like
That's not what I asked. Is Saudi Arabia geographically in Asia?
Yes.
Yes, but none of us would, if I say, are Saudi Arabians Asians? No. Yes? How are they Asian? If I ask you, but does that make them in our, my point is, when we think of a Saudi, do we think the same people as we think of when we say Asian?
No.
No, of course not. But that doesn't mean that Saudi Arabia is in Asia. My point is that how we determine identity and ethnicity and race is not the same as everyone in the world does it, and it's not the same as Americans have always done it. So let's be aware of a couple things. First of all, when we say white, we should be talking about racial categories, not ethnic categories. When we talk of, because is every Hispanic in the world exactly the same?
No.
It's insulting to even claim that. Just the same that different ethnicities that are racially white are also very different. So let's be careful with our terminology when we are using racial and ethnic terms. So let's stick to, when we're talking about ethnicity, let's stick to ethnicities. We're talking about nationality, let's stick to nationality. We're talking about race, let's stick to races. And try to be careful with our definitions and with our words. Anyway, I'm glad we got through that because it's important. It's interesting too. Here in New England, everybody's English, and most everybody's Puritan, or the descendants of Puritans, because the Puritans didn't want anybody that wasn't Puritan, and quite frankly, the Puritans are a little hardcore. Most people, when they decided to move to the colonies, unless you were a Puritan, you did not move to where there were other Puritans. They kind of kept to themselves. They didn't like outsiders, and outsiders, quite frankly, didn't like them. Which is why Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, the heart of Puritan America, has very little ethnic diversity, has very little religious diversity. Those thriving towns and cities of New England, most everybody there is English. Most everybody there is Puritan or a descendant of Puritans, kind of as Puritanism faded as a religious force. They were Yankees then, ethnically English. But let's move south into some more interesting ethnic places in the 13 colonies. In the Hudson River Valley, New York, and North Jersey, who do we start to see here? The Dutch. Actually, no, let's play this game a little bit here. Before we get into specifics, who else do we see? Let's start with the Dutch. We definitely see some Dutch people. Who else is in the map?
Germans.
Scotch, or Scots. German. Africans. English.
The Swedish.
Swedes. Of all people.
That's how you pronounce it. Welsh is.
Where are the Welsh from?
Aren't they part of the UK?
They are part of the UK. What's their country?
Wales.
Wales. They're from Wales. Wales. It's the western mountainous part of Great Britain. If we fired up a map of Great Britain, I could show you, but we gotta roll. Google it. Ain't no Wales. Dutch, Scotch, Germans, the Scotch and the Scotch-Irish, they're similar enough that we don't have to differentiate. The Welsh.
Oh, those
Welsh. They spell stuff really weird.
don't they have like their own language?
Oh yeah, Celtic.
Yeah.
Llewellyn.
Bless you.
Sean.
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 They speak Celtic?
Yeah, Celtic. Yeah, Sean. Find people of Welsh descent, they might name their kid Sean and spell it like that. Let's take some of these people kind of, so in New York, we start with the Dutch. Why are there Dutch people in New York? Because it was a Dutch colony. The English took it over in the 1670s, I want to say, and then pretty much left the Dutch alone. The Dutch in New York stayed prosperous. Some of them had huge land holdings. Some of the most famous names in America, the Roosevelts are a great example. The Roosevelts were Dutch. If you ever want to see some unbelievable mansions, drive on Route 9 up about 20 miles north of New York City along the Hudson River. That's where all those old Dutch families built mansions like...
They're still there.
Oh yeah, some of the Dutch families still live in there. Oh, tens of millions of dollars. I mean, you're not talking about like a Westfield mansion. You're talking about like a real, honest-to-God, servants mansion.
Surf mansion.
Like, but not superstar, like, because those are new. These mansions are 100, 150 year, they're castles, pretty much. I mean, they're castles. And they're a short, once you guys get your driver's licenses, and a lot of them are, you can drive like kind of into driveways and see them. Some of them are open to the public. Want to take a neat drive? Hey, it's gorgeous up there. It's less than an hour, it's 45 minutes drive from here. Less than that, with no traffic. Go drive up the Hudson River, see those old Dutch family estates along the Hudson River on Route 9. They are gorgeous. The Roosevelts are the most famous in American history. That's who they are. The Roosevelts are a Dutch name. Some other Dutch names that you might know. I don't know if I put these on the board in this class or not. Mr. Bronx.
Like New York?
Yeah. The Bronx is a Dutch name. Mr. Bronx owned land that's today. Because the Anglican, they made it an English sound, an English looking name. Another guy in New York that owned land, the Dutch guy. Mr. Brooklyn. That's where these names come from. American place names. Yeah, they're Dutch names. Mr. Brooklyn, Mr. Bronx. Yeah, they're originally Dutch names. There are a lot of Dutch names still in New York. Hudson's English. So the Dutch stayed, they farmed, they had big estates. Eventually they kind of mixed and mashed in with other people and just became white. So that's the Dutch. The Swedes and the Welsh we can finish off in a sentence or two. They came, they established colonies, and eventually they just intermarried with other white people and became white. There's a Swedish colony in south of Philadelphia in what's today southwestern New Jersey. It was first settled by Swedes, bringing kind of that ethnic mix into the old colonies. Let's look at Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania is kind of the key state when it comes to white ethnics in American colonial history. I want to talk about three specific groups in Pennsylvania. I want to start with the Quakers, who are not an ethnic group, but a religious group. They are Protestants, they're Protestant Christians, of a very unusual set of beliefs. Someone tell me something about the Quakers. Tell me one thing about the Quakers, Elizabeth. What do you know about the Quakers? I saw your hand kind of
They
pulled over the air.
go against slavery.
They are the first group of people to have a moral problem with slavery. Whenever you are talking about the American abolitionist movement, if you start with the Quakers, you will always get it right. They are anti-slavery when no one else in the world was. Good. Beyonce, something else about that.
They have no rituals or ministers.
No rituals or ministers because how did they view religion and God? There was something kind of a little interesting about the Quakers, that inner light. The idea that every individual person can communicate directly with God. And if every individual person can communicate directly with God, there's no need for a priesthood. Quakers don't have churches, they have what they call meeting houses, and at which they call everybody friend. It's kind of, and this still exists. There are Quaker meeting houses, especially in the Philadelphia area still today. And religious services in a Quaker meeting house.
They were extremely tolerant.
Okay, they're extremely tolerant. We're going to talk about their services. It's not, there's no ritual, there's no priest. They just sit around and they talk on the Bible. They debate, they argue, men and women equal. They're not sitting apart. You know, women get to speak, stand up and speak up just the same as anybody else. They are egalitarian in that regard. They are incredibly open and tolerant. Anyone can become a Quaker. The Quakers don't mind being neighbors with anybody. They are pacifists. They will not fight in militaries. And a lot of those things are still true today. The Quakers won't fight in the American military. They can opt out and do other sort of service if they are drafted. So these are some interesting, and they're adult baptizers, which means they don't baptize infants, they baptize adults. The argument going that as an adult you can consciously choose to be baptized, which obviously you cannot do when you are an infant. They are an interesting group of people, to say the least, and persecuted all over Europe for their beliefs, because they were so kind of outside the mainstream. A guy by the name of William Penn, he's got his Daddy Penn, whose name escapes me right now. Daddy Penn was an English admiral who did a lot of big favors for the king, and the king owed him a lot of money.
So we give him Pennsylvania.
He didn't give him Pennsylvania, he gave his son Pennsylvania. William is an interesting character. William grows up in the lap of luxury. His father is this famous English admiral, but as a young man he gives that all up and decides to become a Quaker. And doesn't get invited to any of the cool parties anymore because Quakers don't get invited to cool parties because Quakers are really weird. So what Penn wants to do is he wants land in the New World to start what he calls this holy experiment. He wants a piece of land where everyone will be tolerated, where Quakers can settle in peace, where people will be free to live a godly life as they please. So he got the land to pay off the debt the king owed to his father, and the king gave him this huge chunk of land in between the southern border of New York and the northern border of Maryland, and he named it, it was named after himself, Pennsylvania, which means Penn's Woods. S-Y-L, Sylvan is the Latin word for forest or woods, Pennsylvania, Penn's Woods, and there he flops down. The Quakers he brings over with him found the city of Philadelphia, and Philadelphia quickly grows into the cultural capital of the 13 colonies. The Quakers in a lot of ways are like the Puritans. They are hardworking, they save now to put off for the future, they are good at business. They're like the Puritans in a lot of ways like that. They're unlike the Puritans in a lot of ways too. They're open and tolerant. They love to eat, drink, and smoke. Quaker parties are good parties. Puritans don't have parties. But Quaker parties are rolling. The Amish, it's a great question. The Amish don't come until about the 1840s. They're another wave of German immigration later. Okay?
Do they speak German today?
Yes, they do. Yeah, the Amish don't speak English as their first language. Some of them don't speak English at all. They speak a form of German. That's why they're called the Pennsylvania Dutch. They're not really Dutch, they're German. How do you say the word German in German? Deutsch. Deutsch. Germany in German is Deutschland. Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles. German's a lovely language. You know how to say I love you in German? Ich liebe du. It's disgusting. French is like, je t'aime. Ich liebe du. The nicest things in German don't sound nice. The Quakers found this city, Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. That's what Philadelphia means. It means brotherly love. And Pennsylvania, and William Penn is as good as his word. The colony that he established, he is in charge of the colony. It's his. It's called a proprietary colony. The colony belongs to William Penn. And he's as good as his word. He establishes complete freedom of religion for anybody. Land is cheap.
Protection
What do you mean protection?
of individual rights.
Protection of individual rights. The right to a jury trial, for example, is guaranteed in Pennsylvania. The Indians are paid fairly for their land. Actually, he means it. If a settler cheated an Indian, and that case got to William Penn more often than not sided with the natives over the settlers. Land is plentiful, bountiful, cheap, jury trial. People have a right to elect an assembly that helps Penn govern. It's a great place for a lot of people. And because it is such a great place, and William Penn does a hell of a lot of advertising too. Penn goes to Europe and pretty much walks around England and Germany going, hey, come to my colony. And because of that, tens of thousands of people start to come to his colony. And they're of three types. Quakers is one, we just talked about that. A whole lot of Germans come. Germans who are not Quakers, but are other persecuted sects, especially a group called the Pietists. The Pietists are people who say, you know what, all of this arguing over religion is stupid, let's just live good, moral, godly lives and stop arguing about it. The Pietists. The Germans settle in and around Philadelphia. They start to move west into the interior of the state. A lot, if you've ever driven through Pennsylvania, a lot of mountains, valleys, mountains, valleys. The valleys are very fertile. Drive through Pennsylvania, and there are so many German place names, starting with the town of Germantown. Anything that ends in a burg is a German place name. Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, Kutztown. Doesn't have a burg, that's another German name. Kutz. Tamaqua, yes. That's right on 309. Yeah, it's right on Route 309. I've driven through Tamaqua many times, actually.
Mister, is it Reading or Reading?
Reading.
Reading has a lot of
Germans or mountains? Hills? Yes. All of central Pennsylvania has a lot of hills.
Reading is really Reading is
A lot of them are, yeah. Reading is what? Yes, the city of Reading, yeah. Central PA. You're one of Reading?
Yeah,
Cool. How did you get out to Reading? How did your family get out to Reading? It's an interesting place to settle. Are your parents immigrants?
Yeah, Puerto Rico.
From where?
Puerto Rico to Reading.
How long have they been in the United States? I'm interested because Reading is not normally a first stop. That's interesting. It really?
There's a lot.
Any city down the Northeast, there's more and more. Hey. Lancaster too, I was just in Lancaster for the wedding.
Does
Anyway.
Lancaster have the Amherst?
Outside of Lancaster, the city looks like Elizabeth, quite frankly. It's outside of Lancaster that you find the Amish, so Lancaster County. The Germans come, they are successful colonists, they are efficient, good farmers, they bring some capital with them, and before long, German farms in the New World are large and thriving, and people are growing food they eat, they are selling extra food at market, it allows this middle class to develop. The Germans in Pennsylvania formed the core of a German ethnic minority in America that would be a fact of American life until World War I, when Woodrow Wilson and the American government extinguished it. speaking German illegal, closed down German schools, closed down German newspapers.
Who is speaking German?
I'm sorry? I didn't hear you. What's the question?
So you can make speaking German illegal?
Yes, he made speaking German, like, you couldn't, teach in school in German.
Oh, you can't teach Spanish. That's not.
That would be something similar, that teachers could not use. Now, there was no even in a non-public school, you couldn't speak. So the German newspapers were shut down, German ethnic clubs were shut down.
Like the Holocaust. With the Jews.
No.
Yeah,
No.
You're talking to other
No, you-
people.
let's-
comparison.
There are pretty much,
Like, how we talk English, we can't talk German. So then how we gonna communicate?
that's the point. Like, the point is to take the German ethnicity in America and stamp it out. What better way to stamp out an ethnicity than stamping out its language, its clubs, its newspapers? Like, you couldn't advertise for your restaurant in German. Okay?
Like, comparing, Darwinism, social Darwinism, like, how they want, to, take out African language, they didn't want Africans.
Well, it was a war thing. This is a war with Germany. It was a reaction to the war. Okay? And then when the war was over, it all kind of ended, but World War I. But by then, the damage had been done. And after World War I, Germany as a kind of a standalone ethnicity in America kind of faded out.
I don't ask him a question. What happened to, when did the Italians come?
1870s, 80s, 90s. 1900, post-Civil War. We'll talk about that in block 6, 5, a lot about that. The Germans, as we can see, started in Pennsylvania and moved. Some moved north. We got some German enclaves here. Some German enclaves here. That's Scotch Irish. Some German enclaves here. Some German enclaves here. But the core of German culture in America was Pennsylvania. The third group that I want to talk about are the Scotch Irish. Also attracted to Pennsylvania when it was founded. The Scotch Irish are different than the Germans. They're not as efficient, they're not as wealthy. The Scotch Irish are people that do not like authority, do not like to be told what to do not like to be told where to live, do not like to... That if you know anything about Scottish culture, the Scots are a clannish people. That your clan, your family, your extended family, your clan is what's important. National institutions do not develop in Scotland like they develop in other places. The Scots, tough as hell, brave as hell, they're great warriors, they're great soldiers, do not like to be told what to do. They're very insular, they don't much like other people, they don't like Indians, they don't like blacks. They like to be left alone to do as they please and don't like much government telling them anything about anything. So as soon as kind of things got a little tight in Pennsylvania, a lot of the Scotch Irish just picked up and moved again. And we can kind of track where the Scotch Irish moved south out a little bit north, and up into these frontier regions in New England. And if we follow them down kind of the mountain trails, where are these Scotch Irish and Scots and Scots-Irish, where are they settling? Are they settling on the coasts? They're still over by the mountains. It's like Scotland. They can, build their little house and start shooting at anybody that comes near them. Kind of thing. They are off in the backwoods. These are going to be your frontiersmen, your pioneers. The ancestors of Andrew Jackson, Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, Sam Houston, are Scotch-Irish settlers. Hello. They bring kind of a, don't tread on me, mess with me and you're going to get messed with right back kind of attitude to the colonies. They're poor, they're dirty, they're illiterate, and they're tough as hell, and they don't want anyone telling them that they ought not be dirty, ought not be illiterate, ought not be anything. They bring this kind of elan, if you will, to colonial is this big giant melting pot. Hundreds of thousands of it. It's one of the biggest immigrant movements in American history as a percentage of the population. About 200,000-300,000 Scotch-Irish came over a period of just about 10 years and settled filled in those backwoods and filled in those back hills, first in Pennsylvania and then spreading out into the South. Your first pioneers in Tennessee, your first pioneers in Kentucky, Scotch-Irish. That leaves who along the coast, basically? Two groups, Africans and English. And you want to see something kind of cool. This is an ethnic map of the United States in 2010. Issued in 2000, not 2010. What this is, the colors are the most common ethnicity in each county in the United States. Blue is German. There are more people in the United States with German ancestors than anything else. The English are a close second. The English and the Germans kind of mixed together and became what, Deontay? White people in the north. In the north, white people are generally an English and German mix. Then later on you get Irish and Italians and Jews. But your average white guy in Ohio, English and German. Now in the South is always different. We've talked about that. The South, you still have two basic ethnicities. The purpley color is what? It's blacks, where slavery was most prominent along the coast and up the Mississippi River. Who are these people in beige? It says American, but what are they ethnically?
English.
Native American.
Caucasian.
They're Scotch-Irish. What you think of as white rednecks are the descendants of the Scotch-Irish. Yeah. In the north, your white people are ethnically English and German. In the South, your white people are some English, a lot of Scotch-Irish. And where they live, in the backwoods of Virginia, the backwoods of the Carolinas, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, it's the same people. More people who join the U.S. military come from here than any other ethnic group in the country. These are your white Southerners, for better or for worse. That's who they are. They are the descendants of these Scotch-Irish colonial immigrants. AKA redneck. And you all know the good redneck jokes, like someone yells "ho down" and your girlfriend hits the floor, you might be a redneck. When you think loading the dishwasher is getting your wife drunk, you might be a redneck. What a cool question! I love this question. The question is, where did their accent come from? I'm going to tell you, this is going to blow your mind a little bit, because you don't think so. When Shakespeare wrote English, when we think of Shakespeare, when we think of Shakespearean English, we think he speaks in this completely British accent, baloney. Shakespeare sounded like a redneck. Shakespearean English in the 1500s sounded like Southern English. What we think of as the British accent is a 19th century Victorian invention to make rich people in London sound different than everybody else. When Shakespeare wrote Hamlet, Hamlet said, "Be or not be." Like, but that's what they sounded like. So actually what happened is they kept the accent. Everybody else has changed. And that means we learned something. Alright. At some point over the long weekend, it is night 4. Growth of colonial slavery. There's the link. It's also on Blackboard, my friends. Please use Blackboard. Can you please turn the chairs before the bell rings?